Hello and welcome back to Art Discourse. My name is Kyle and this is my partner Chrissy. We are here to answer all of your art-related questions. We're going to give you the best advice possible in all of the internet land.
All right, well, no pressure there. For written components, what information should be included in a project description and a technical description? For written components, I'm assuming this is for a grant. Like, it doesn't say specifically that, but I'm going to take a guess. That's the written components for a grant or maybe application. What information should be included in a project description and a technical description?
Today on Art Discourse, we talk about the difference between an artist statement, a project description, and a technical description.
Hello, it's me again. I'm calling from a faraway land. Pick up the phone. I'm calling from a different time zone. Heard you are a pretty good source for major topics in art discourse. Hello, I'll leave my questions as a message at the dial tone.
I don't think I know what a technical description is.
Well, I think that it's pretty straightforward. So why don't we start with when you are working towards an application, or be it for a grant, be it for a residency or an exhibition or whatever it is that you are writing for, they will ask you for different bits of information. And it's important to understand the difference between those things. So we are going to talk about what a project description is. A project description is not your artist statement. This isn't where you wax poetic and you drop academic words. It is a description of what the project is.
I think like the big thing to think about for any of these things, but especially a project description, is being very specific and trying to make it so that when people read the description, they can see what the project is going to look like without seeing any images, and they understand why you need to be doing it and how you're going to do it. So this is where you really want to answer those like where, what, why, when, how questions. That's the big key thing there.
We're going to use my OAC, the Ontario Arts Council grant that I received in 2021. This was a grant I applied for to research non-toxic stone lithography. I believe in my project description, I described how I want to use this grant money to perform non-toxic stone lithographic research, which is outlined in a book called Printmaking Revolution by Dwight Pogue, and I wanted to specifically look at like how to transition away from using old school nitric acid and lithotein and trying to use more contemporary methods as outlined in the book, as using tannic acid and using some biosolve and some newer chemicals. And so that's the project description.
Yes.
The project description is I want to do this research in stone lithography.
Exactly. When you think about the how, so how do we answer the how? Well, we have a print studio on our property, so we have the equipment here. We also had recently received a donation from the Station Gallery with a bunch of their litho equipment. So that answered also the how, but also the why. So why do we need to do this right now? So we were donated all of this wonderful equipment kind of just before the pandemic.
Yep.
And we aren't set up to do this type of stone lithography because our studio is non-toxic. So it made that there's this pressure to actually get this working because we got this donation. Yep. And then the what, like Kyle was saying, the what is the research. So researching and purchasing the materials necessary to do the research, plus the time it takes to do the research. What am I missing? Where, what, why, when? When was basically immediately. We wanted to be able to get into the studio and working on this as quickly as possible so that we could be able to use this beautiful equipment that we had. So all of those answers were basically all those questions were answered right in that project description. Can I add one more thing?
Oh, of course.
Okay. We'll put the project description up, or maybe it'll take over the whole screen so you can really see it. In the project description, you'll see that we don't talk about how we ran a residency or how much we love print or all the different types of print that Kyle can do. And we don't talk about his imagery. We don't talk about how, reading books is really fun. We don't talk about how this will also give him time to go on long walks and think about, doing the research for the litho project. No, it's very this is the project, we're only talking about this project, because they don't need to hear about anything else. I say this because we've read a lot of project descriptions where people are like, I'm really interested in the atmosphere of working in the fall sun and, you know, having the leaves gently falling off trees surrounding me and the picture, like, and you're like, what are you working on in the fall? Is it specifically need to be done outside, or is that just like a preference? Like, I don't know, so be specific.
The project description is a description of the project. It's exactly what it says. If it does not describe the project, it does not need to be in that paragraph. However, talking about technical description, this is a bit different. So a technical description sometimes is asked for. I wouldn't say it's a very commonly asked for component, but this is where you would have an opportunity to talk about like the logistics of it and more detail about the specific execution of the thing. In the technical description of my grant, I would describe it as being, I'm going to grind down stones, and I'm going to use some of those old processes of preparing the stone. But at the point that chemistry begins to get involved, we are not going to be using lithotine and asphaltum, and we're not going to be using nitric acid, or we're not going to be using solvents. Instead, we're going to be replacing these chemicals with these chemicals. And what I plan on doing in my project is executing some stones in traditional manner, drawing on stone and using that, but I'm also interested in using some new photo transfer methods using DNS POSI something.
We're gonna post this series to the YouTube page if you're curious about following along.
In this technical description, this is like when you start listing up those things. Now say you're not making an OAC grant about stone lithography, but instead this is a technical description of like, you're doing a painting project. This is when you would say, I'm gonna be working on 4 5-foot by 4-foot canvases stretched onto wood stretchers. They are going to be gessoed 17,000 times and sanded a bajillion times, and we are going to emulate the work surface of the masters of the Renaissance period, and we are going to be working with these specific materials, and we're going to be executing it in this kind of timeline, and I'm hoping to achieve these kinds of results.
Yeah, I think also maybe if you're working in like more like new media, technical can get really like can be very helpful too. If you're like proposing to work with a team, you know, you might want to say like, I'm comfortable working in 3D modeling and rigging, but I'm not comfortable working in compositing or, you know, sound or something like that. So you can start kind of like honing in on like where in that industry you want to be working. I don't know if that's actually like when you could use the technical information, but I feel like that makes sense to my brain.
Well, it's not really necessarily the appropriate part for the description. It's not your artist statement. That's really where it should be.
Yeah.
Like if you are working with a team, that's where you can be nerdy and you can talk about what weird niche part of your like group project that you're working on.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. If we're completely off base with what a technical description is in reference to maybe where this question is coming from, we'll put up any like correction. Or if you're like, dudes, that's not at all what a technical description is. I don't feel like I've ever written a grant or an application where I'm asked for that, unless it's like giving specs for like how we're gonna set up a gallery space, where we're like giving schematics of like, this is the room and this is how much space we're gonna occupy and this is how we're gonna hang things and structurally this is what we're gonna need, and like here are some issues we think where people might like bump into stuff. Like we've had to do that for public art projects and murals and that sort of thing.
I think that's what a technical description is.
All right.
Because it's not like if you're applying to a show and to a gallery, you'd be submitting blueprints, you'd be submitting some sort of rough sketch or design layout, like that's where this would be. A technical description isn't just a cookie cutter paragraph that you can copy and paste amongst all of your applications. It's going to be very project specific. Mm-hmm. But this is the opportunity to talk about those things, not necessarily in the project description where you might be talking about, you know, some of those like kind of like looser themes about like what you're doing, and then, you know, there's that project description, there's that technical description, and then there's the artist statement, which is definitely separate than the other two. This is the standard artist statement, and that's not to be part of a project description. Mind you, there are going to be applications that just have a paragraph, that one question that's like, describe the project, and you might have to synthesize your artist statement, everything down into that one paragraph. But I think for most applications, they will separate at least a project description and an artist statement out. Mm-hmm. Whether or not there's that third one of technical description, that sometimes is a bit of a question mark. If you are in a position where your application only has those two kinds of questions, that technical description would get lumped and summarized in the project description.
Yeah, we could do like a whole workshop on just grant applications. But your artist statement is usually where you're speaking more conceptually about your practice as a whole. So what themes are you working with? What kind of research do you seem to explore? Why are you choosing the types of materials that you're choosing? How do they relate to those themes? Is there like, you know, parts of your practice that are really integral to its success? Like, do you need community engagement? Is there a social justice arm to your project? And so, if, you know, it's a little bit where your project opens up to like the broadness of what it's talking about, whereas that project description is like really zoning in on what are you making for this particular application? And so, you know, you're really giving the jury like a very large stroke of your practice when you're looking at these things. So that you kind of want them all to be working independently of each other, but calling back to one another in some way. I guess maybe if we think about your application, just to like really like synthesize this, Kyle's artist statement, and maybe we'll put a version of it up, talks about the imagery that he uses and why he uses that imagery and how that relates to the larger themes of his work. And when you compare that to the project description, you just know that probably the images that are going to be on those stones that he's working with are going to reflect back to what is being stated in the artist statement. But none of that artist statement information is relevant to why he wants to do the research. I guess there's a bit of a crossover actually with the like environmental aspect of your work.
Yes, yeah. There is a bit of crossover.
Yeah.
But that's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like... Anyways, that's it for this week's art discourse. Now just keep in mind, you know, whatever that application is asking for, answer those questions directly. If there is a project description question and an artist statement question, keep those things separate. Don't let them, like, they can kind of reference one another, but, you know, keep the crazy academic talk in the artist statement and keep it out of the project description.
Until next time.
Goodbye for now.